Book of John chapter 18. After Jesus had spoken these words, he and his disciples crossed the brook Cedron and entered a garden, a place he often frequented with his disciples. Judas, who would later betray him, also knew this place, as Jesus had visited it with his disciples before. Judas, having received a group of men and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came to the garden carrying lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, fully aware of all that was about to happen, stepped forward and asked them, "Whom are you seeking?" They replied, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, the one who would betray him, stood there with them. As soon as Jesus said, "I am he," they staggered backward and fell to the ground. Jesus asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" They said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you seek me, let these men go." He said this to fulfill his earlier words, "Of those you gave me, I have lost none." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword back into its sheath. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" The band of soldiers, along with their captain and the Jewish officers, arrested Jesus and bound him. They first took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest for that year. Now Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it would be better for one man to die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. This disciple was known to the high priest and went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. Peter, however, stood outside at the door. The other disciple, who was known to the high priest, spoke to the woman at the door and brought Peter in. The woman at the door said to Peter, "Aren't you also one of this man's disciples?" He replied, "I am not." The servants and officers had made a fire of coals because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also stood with them and warmed himself. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. Jesus replied, "I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why do you ask me? Ask those who heard me. They know what I said." When Jesus said this, one of the officers nearby struck him in the face. "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" he demanded. "If I have said something wrong," Jesus replied, "testify to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas the high priest. Meanwhile, Simon Peter was still standing there warming himself. So they asked him, "Aren't you one of his disciples?" He denied it, saying, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment a rooster crowed. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover meal. Pilate then came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" They answered, "If he were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "Is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me?" Pilate retorted, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king, then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this, he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising.